Welcome to 3 true scary stories from Reddit. Like I said before, not even sickness can stop me from doing these videos. Let's begin. Number 1. It's amazing how things can haunt us, and past experiences makes us distrust other people. I've been carrying this around, but I've never told anyone the whole story. This all started back in 2004. I can't believe it's been 11 years now. I was 14 back then. I was a pretty good kid. I was very polite. I did very well in school, and I was always home by 6 to eat dinner. I never stayed out late or did anything wrong, such as drugs or drinking alcohol or anything of the sort. I used to be fairly thin but strong. People had always compared me to other girls, and I was never quite as feminine as them. I didn't mind much. In my opinion, climbing trees was far superior to wearing pretty dresses and makeup. I was proud to be masculine and strong, but it didn't exactly make me popular, and as a result, finding new friends was hard. So, I started taking up some hobbies, and among those was martial arts. It fit well with me, and we were all a small team of 7 to 8 people who got along pretty well. One of these guys, Matt, was a pretty shy and quiet boy. We were all around the age of 14, and I was pretty direct, and I thought that it simply intimidated him a bit. So I tried to make him feel more included when the others and I spoke, since I had previously known what it felt like to be an outsider in social groups. And we were a really friendly bunch. We rode our bikes to and from practice, and I noticed we always went quite a bit of way down the same road. So we naturally started to talk while riding our bikes home. It was fine. He seemed friendly, maybe a little weird, but I was weird too, so who was I to judge? Everything went just like business as usual for the whole first year. We all became friends, and I cherished it, as I didn't really have many others. But the year after was my last year at our regular schools, and I wanted to do well, and frankly, I had too much on my plate. So I started to skip practice from time to time to do homework. This didn't go over well with Matt, and he started texting me asking where I was. Weird thing was that I hadn't given him my number, but I didn't know anyone else with that name. I didn't respond a lot, since my dad paid for my phone, and he would get angry if I spent too much on anything. So one day, I stopped responding at all. This must have prompted him to begin calling me. I didn't like that and didn't pick up at all for a while. I still sometimes came to practice, but this was kind of freaking me out, and I didn't really like where it was going. Whenever he saw me there, he just kind of stood and stared at me, and had reverted to always being the quiet kid in the background. I stopped trying to get him fitted into our conversations at this point, since he started scaring me, and I began going home in an alternate route, since I couldn't deal being stuck by his side for 10 minutes on my bike. While this went on, he kept calling me and I never picked up. One day, I had added with the constant calls, and I picked up. "Hello?" I asked, pretty harshly. He probably hadn't expected me to pick up at all. His breathing was somewhat heavy, and it gave me the chills. "Hey," he said, Are you coming to practice on Wednesday?" He sounded weirder than normal, and I regretted my decision to pick up the phone. "Yeah, of course." And I was met with a complete silence for a while. "Good. I'll see you there." I could hear the smile in his voice, and it sent a shiver down my spine. Wednesday came, and I was in way over my head, and decided against going to practice. I hoped he wouldn't call again, and he didn't. My phone was silent for several weeks. When I felt comfortable, I went back to practice, but he wasn't there. I thought that maybe he had finally gotten the hint and decided to leave me alone. But my curiosity got the best of me, and I asked the only other girl about it. What she told me next was so surreal and chilling. "Oh, Matt? Yeah, it happened a few weeks ago, I think. You weren't here, and he barged in the middle of practice, and yelled out your name. 'Look at what you've done to me,' he yelled, and showed off his arms. They were cut and torn, and blood was dripping everywhere," she said. I was shocked, but also very glad I had decided against going on that day. She then told me how our teacher had called for an ambulance and tried to calm Matt down. He had apparently gone ballistic when he realized I wasn't even there. He had then been committed to the psych ward, and as far as I gathered, his phone and other belongings were not available to him until he had undergone complete psychiatric evaluation. I felt relieved. Now, surely, I would be safe. Only I wasn't. The psych ward was in my city, and at one point they must have let him have his phone back, because he began calling me, and this time he left voice messages. He said things like, "You're a horrible person. You ruined me, and no one will ever love you like I could have." I was mostly confused. We had never been romantic in any way whatsoever, and I had never expressed interest in him. I begged my father to change my number so I could be free of the harassment, but my father didn't budge. He was angry that people were calling me, but he couldn't be bothered to remember a new number if I got one, so I was stuck with the one I had. After a while, the voicemail stopped, but this was at a time when my rebellious phase began, and I attended protests to keep some historical cultural buildings in Copenhagen. Somehow, he found me there. Every Thursday, at the peaceful protests, he was there, staring at me. I was with friends, but I still felt threatened. His scarred arms, sometimes with new cuts, were horrifying. I didn't know what to do, so I always stayed close to my friends. I had hoped my punk phase would deter him, since I dyed my hair green, red, black, whatever, and wore different clothes. But it seemed that it only made matters worse. He texted me sometimes during the protests, saying how I looked hot, or how he liked my legs in that skirt. Weird shit like that. I tried to glare at him, but I couldn't look at him for long. He scared me. This went on for several weeks. Then, one day, he began sending me mails. I have no idea how he got hold of my email address, since I usually don't share it with anyone. In the mails, he described how he was feeling, that he was willing to forgive me for what I'd done to him. That he had watched me from afar for a while now and wanted to be in my life again. He described what I'd been wearing that day, and even on days I hadn't been at a protest. One day, he messaged me, "You look so peaceful when you sleep." I noped the fuck out at that point and told my dad everything. He was kind of upset, more that I hadn't told him anything until now, but he didn't yell at me too much. The following month, we moved to another town a few hours away. The messages stopped for a while, until one day, he wrote a chilling text saying, "Why haven't I seen you in your apartment for a while? Did you move? Where are you?" I froze. He had known where I lived. I lived on the ground floor in an apartment, and my room had just been our small garden. I was chilled to the bone thinking that maybe he had actually stood outside my window and watched me sleep. After this, I heard nothing from him. I got a boyfriend and we moved into an apartment together in a different town when we were 18. I forgot about Matt and didn't think about him anymore. One day, while we were out shopping for groceries, I saw him again. He hadn't seen me, it would seem, and I ducked behind my boyfriend and told him, "Please, let's just hide. I don't want him to see me." We stayed behind him for a while, but I was extremely nervous that he would notice me. He didn't. He just bought some stuff and went out. I hoped he was just visiting someone in the area and that I wouldn't see him again. A few weeks later, I went to the town square to draw in the sun. I sat down, music in my ears, and started drawing. A few hours went by, and suddenly someone sat down beside me. It was Matt, of course. I took off my headphones, a little terrified, but we were in a fairly busy public place, so I didn't feel that threatened. He began talking to me as if we were old friends, telling me how he looked up to Kurt Cobain, how he learned to play the guitar, how many girls he had fucked, shit like that. I listened and politely replied with, "Oh, uh-huh, and really?" He started complimenting me, and I felt increasingly awkward. He then mentioned that I was welcome to visit him whenever I wanted. I have always been a bit curious, so I asked where he lived, and he pointed at an apartment. It turned out he lived right across the fucking street from me. I made up an excuse and said I had to go. He seemed annoyed, but accepted it. I went to the library and made sure to watch out for him in case he was following me. But after a few minutes, I decided he had lost interest. I haven't heard from him since, but the fact that he suddenly lived across the street from me freaked me out for quite a while. So, Matt, I hope we never meet again. Number 2. My New Year resolution in 2012 was to get in shape again. After my first kid was born, I had lost my athletic interest, but I had every intention of getting it back. So I started running 4 days a week with my friend Hannah, who was a great runner and motivator. We would run after work, 5 to 10 kilometers, usually favoring the forest trail. It's the kind of trail that got lighting in the darker months of the year, so you can run there any time really. Once you turn on the lights, you got 45 minutes to run the shorter trails, and longer to run the longer ones. Then the lights shut off automatically. We had been running for about 2 months when we started seeing the same man hanging around the parking lot every time we got there. Thin man, 25 to 30 years of age, always dressed in sports clothing, but never actually running. He never looked you in the eye either. We speculated that he could be homeless, camping nearby, because he was constantly there. We got used to seeing him, sitting somewhere close by, silently, and always on his own. We felt sorry for him. He never seemed to talk to anyone or interact at all. But there was something about him that made us hesitant to talk to him or ask him if he was okay. Can't pinpoint what it was, but something wasn't completely right with him. One evening, Hannah didn't make it to our run, and I decided to go on my own. I arrived at the parking lot, my car being the only car there. I did some stretching, turned on the lights, and set off on the 5-kilometer trail. I hadn't seen the thin, silent man when I started my run. Perhaps it was getting too cold to sit there now that it was autumn, dark, and getting closer to the freezing point. He must have been there though, somewhere in the shadows, because when I got to the top of the first steep hill, I could hear heavy breathing somewhere behind me. I look over my shoulder, and I see him. He is running like a man obsessed, in regular shoes, not running shoes, with his arms moving in a really strange, stiff manner, as if he was made of metal. His hands like arrows, straight and in an upward, inward angle, sort of like a sprinter, but more extreme, moving like a robot. For the first time, he looked me straight in the eyes, and it was the eyes of a predatory animal, and it made my heart freeze. He had never done anything to harm me, or anyone else as far as I knew. But the look in his eyes alone was enough to let me know that I was facing a serious, serious threat. I started running faster, trying to create distance between us, and I could hear his heavy breathing getting even more strained. I ran like my entire life depended on it, adrenaline pumping through my body and giving me new strength. I tore off my necklace and threw it on the ground, thinking, I must leave a trace if he takes me. Something must be left behind. I tried screaming, hoping someone would be close enough to hear me, but I couldn't scream my lungs out and keep up the pace at the same time. Why is he doing this? What does he want? Who is he? I thought, as I started to feel my legs burn. Then I thought of my 15-month-old daughter, and ran until I could taste blood in my mouth. He was still behind me, maybe 100 meters behind now, but I figured that if I trip and fall, or run out of energy, or fumble with the car keys once I reach the parking lot, then I'm screwed. So once I reached the sharp turn on the trail, I went off the trail and ran straight into the dark woods. I ran only a short distance, and then I laid down flat on my stomach, my hands searching for a rock to defend myself with if he found me. I realized that I was wearing bright running clothes with reflectives and neon coloring. I had never felt so visible in the dark before. I could hear him reach the turn, and thank God, keep on running. I started to slowly, and as silently as possible, moved further into the darkness. My heart sank again as soon as I heard rapid footsteps closing in from the trail. He had realized that I must have gone off the trail once he saw that there was no sign of me ahead. He stopped, and I stopped. I can imagine him listening for any sound, and I held my breath and begged the God I don't believe in to make him go away. After a while, I heard him say something in a language I didn't recognize and walk off. I didn't move. I feared that he would wait for me by the car, and realized that I had to get off the trail and onto the main road and stop someone. I couldn't go back to the parking lot. I started to make my way further into the woods, knowing that I would eventually end up on the last part of the long trail and close to the main road. The lights on the trail suddenly shut off. That made me calmer at first. The dark was a comfort and protection. But then, after only a few moments, it switched on again. This could mean that another person had just started the run, and soon I would have someone there to help me, or that he was out looking for me, or getting ready to prey on another lonely runner. I decided against waiting to find out, and continued my way towards the main road. It was dark, and I fell multiple times, my clothes getting wet from the damp vegetation, and I started to get cold. After what felt like a lifetime, I could see the 10-kilometer trail ahead and knew I was close to the main road. Soon I could hear the traffic. Once I made it to the road, I must have looked like I'd been in a terrible accident. Blood from several small cuts from the falling, my clothes dirty, and my face, I assume, petrified. My bright runner shirt soon attracted the attention of a passing car. My waving and desperate shouting made it stop. The driver, a 40-ish man, with his 2 kids in the back seat, spent the next 10 minutes or so trying to make sense of what I tried to say between the sobbing and the crying. He asked if I wanted to lift back to the parking lot, and I told him no. Please take me home instead. At home, my husband insisted on going back to the parking lot to retrieve the car and calling the police. And report what? I asked. No crime had been committed. I just knew that he was out to get me. My husband went back for the car. The driver's seat window was smashed and my phone was gone. So was the photo of my daughter that I had hanging from the mirror. I don't know what he was trying to do, or why he chased me the way he did. But the look in his eyes, there was no doubt he had bad intentions. Creepy forest trail man, let's never meet again. Number 3. I was living with my boyfriend a few years back. We were living in a suburban area that was slightly sketchy, but never anything as a woman I was too afraid to venture out alone in. Anyway, one night we were both in the apartment, watching TV in the living room, when a loud banging pounded on the door, over and over and over. We were scared shitless, just staring at each other because this was not knocking, it was banging, pounding. We had no peephole in our door, so we sat there frozen, waiting for the aggressive pounding and handle rattling to end. After a while, it stopped. About 30 seconds later, the sliding glass door in the kitchen began to rattle, as though someone was trying to pull it open. Luckily, it had the screen door locked, the glass door itself locked, and a wooden thick stick in the track to prevent it from being opened from the outside. We were so scared, but did not make a move. Finally, the banging and jiggling on the kitchen door stopped. We were relieved. We brushed it off and began watching TV again. About a minute and a half later, the pounding on the front door began again, with intense jiggles on the handle. We waited it out in complete fear until we heard pounding on the door in the distance. Our neighbor's door. We were so frightened, we went to bed deciding we should start looking for another place. The next day, I went to the kitchen and the screen door was open completely. I know I shut it the previous night because of mosquitoes. We moved soon after. Another similar thing happened while I was in the home alone later. Never figured out who or what that was. Thanks for listening to another 3 True Scary Stories from Reddit. If you like this video, don't forget to leave a thumbs up and subscribe for even more dark stories. Until then, good night everybody, and stay safe.